Orange is the New Black, Season 7, the final season of Orange is the New Black. If I'm not mistaken, I shared all my feedback from each of the previous seasons of Orange as I watched them over the years. And this is one of those shows that was a Netflix original. Was one of their like bangers. Usually like their originals, you know, they have like 1 or 2, maybe 3 seasons. This one went on for 7 seasons. It was one of like, I think like the early hits early on in Netflix streaming at least. And I personally thought it was a phenomenal show. I have some points here that I wrote down while I was watching the show. Again, I finished it a couple months ago. I just hadn't gotten around to recording an episode about it. And usually what I do while I'm watching a show or a movie or right after it, I like jot down certain points or things or scenes or lines of dialogue that like resonated with me that I liked and that I eventually want to use to share on the podcast. And sometimes it could be like days later when I'm thinking about the show or the movie or happen to think about it and I come up with something else that I find interesting, you know, I jot that down. So I say all that just to say that none of what I'm about to share is in like any particular order or anything like that. But yeah, just some cool takeaways that I got from Season 7 of Orange is the New Black, the final season, which is currently and still streaming on Netflix. You know, it was crazy sad. One of the things, this was like a morose season. Is that the right word? Is that the right use of the word? I think the use is right. I'm not sure if the word is actually right. Morose. Anyway, it was a sad season in many respects. It dealt with immigration and injustices around some folks caught up in that system. It dealt with mental illness, heavy, especially when it came to like Lorna, when it came to Tasty thinking about killing herself for like more than half the season, addiction issues with folks like Daya, other mental illness related issues that hit home for me personally with Red having Alzheimer's or dementia. There were redemption stories with Aleida getting out and trying to do right, but winding up doing wrong again. Or with Maria finding Jesus and shit. Joe Paterno being caught up in the whole like Me Too movement. There's a lot of layers, a lot of different things going on in this season. Something for everybody, if you will. But yeah, back to what I was referring to that was really sad with Lorna is that she, I don't know if you guys remember, she wound up like getting pregnant during a visit from her husband a season or 2 before that, you know, they like got a guard to look the other way or I forgot how they finagled it, but they wound up like banging on top of or against rather the vending machines. And she winds up getting pregnant, winds up having a baby, and the baby is sick and winds up dying. And that's obviously would hit home for like any parent, but it was like sad seeing her like deal with that. And the way she dealt with it was that she didn't tell anybody. She like internalized it, denied it, like never came to terms with it, and it like drove her nuts. But she would, to like all her friends in jail and the prison and stuff, she would just continue like speaking about the baby like as if it was alive. And they have some of them have like phones that they smuggled in or they had smuggled in, and you know, they go online, they have Instagram accounts and shit, and she like keeps posting pictures of the baby by going onto by like Googling images of babies that she felt like looked like hers, and she would like put different pictures up of different babies and stuff. It was like sad to see her like go through that shit. There was one scene that I found pretty cool, a line from it rather, when Nikki is sitting with Lorna like consoling her and shit, and they are actually both on cell phones and just sitting next to each other. Nikki goes, "We're 2 friends spending parallel quality time together, just as nature intended." I thought that was pretty funny, and definitely a testament to the times of today when you're like sitting next to somebody and both of you are like on your phones or multiple of yous or on the phone. I'm guilty of it myself, but it's something that I always think is funny when I'm on like the outside looking on the opposite side of it and I see people like doing it. The show also deals with homelessness and like people getting out of the prison and things not going right for them, and then winding up like on the streets. Would you guys want to hear a sick stat? If I'm not mistaken, Los Angeles is like the most rampant city in the United States with homelessness. And if I'm wrong, somebody, reach out, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at Spun Today. But according to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, there's approximately 60,000 homeless people in Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, not the entire state of California, the city of Los Angeles today. 60,000. Like, they literally have areas of Los Angeles that they've named Tent City, because it's just like blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks of folks like living in tents, living in the street. That's crazy. But yeah, the show delves a little bit into that by portraying my homegirl, Cindy Hayes, and someone that wound up like leaving her mom's house after getting out because of some issues that she had there. And she pretty much like ran away and wound up just living in the streets. And I followed her around a bit. And I call her my homegirl because I actually saw her on the train. So I think I have the right to call her that now. We're friends. We're BFFs. No, but I did see her, Cindy Hayes, Adrian Seymour, which plays Cindy Hayes. I saw her on the train. I walk on. I'm standing, coming home from work. It's rush hour. I'm standing towards like the back of the train where she is as well. And she's with another guy that, wasn't like right next to her. But, like sometimes when you're with somebody but the train is packed, you like can't fit next to each other, really. He was like by the door and she was more by like holding onto the railing in front of the seats. There was like 3 seats by like the end on most trains. And then I was like right by her and I looked at her a couple times and she looked at me and I was kind of like I knew who she was instantly. Which she was like a lot thinner and like shorter than she is on the show. Or, shorter. I picture her being like mad tall for some reason. But and I'm not tall myself. But I couldn't think of her fucking name. I definitely didn't know her real name, which I looked up and I now know is Adrian Moore. But I couldn't think of her name on the show. And I was like, fuck, man. Like I want to say, yo, Cindy, what's up? Or like something. I couldn't think of any of the characters' names on the show. So I just like awkwardly looked at her a couple times and then she wound up like having to like say excuse me to me to like get off the train like on her stop. I think she got off like on Nostrand or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I thought that was fucking cool. I saw Cindy Hayes on the train. And then you know what happened to me? A couple days later, literally, I saw Colin Quinn on the train as well. I was leaving work and he was like buying a Metro card at one of the machines. And I was like, oh shit. And again, I couldn't think of his fucking name. And I had literally just seen, like, I know who Colin Quinn is, like, as a comic. And I had literally recently had just seen the Red State, Blue State thing that he did on a special that he did on Netflix. And I really liked which was really good, by the way. And I really liked, he did a New York story back in the day also. Not even that back in the day. I think it was like on Netflix or maybe HBO. But that was like really dope. And I was like, fuck, I couldn't think of his fucking name. He was like by himself there, like trying to figure out like how to buy a Metro card or something. And then I walked down to the train and then I Googled, Red State, Blue State, or either that or the New York story. And, his name popped up and I was like, fuck, Colin Quinn. Then I was like on a streak of like seeing famous people, which has never happened to me before. Maybe like once or twice ever, but I can't remember any. Then a couple weeks after that, I was on, I was leaving the Intrepid Museum because I did I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the podcast or not, but I did like a 9/11 volunteer thing through work where we like packaged food for homeless folks. And leaving it, me and my boy from work, I see somebody get out of a cab, and I was like, oh shit, look, it's Kevin Bacon. And I actually remembered the name. I was like proud of myself. I was like, fuck, I actually like got his name. My boy was like, is it? Are you sure? And I was like, yo, Kev. And I like waved, and he like looked over and gave me like a head nod and waved. And then, he kept walking, we kept walking. I was like, oh shit. And then this lady like wound up like coming down to me and saying, what's that actor's name? The one that was just there? And I was like, Kevin Bacon. She was like, Kevin Bacon. So she was like how I was a couple weeks before. with Colin Quinn and Adrian Moore. Anyways, I digress. Immigration ice courts. This is something else that this show tackles, which if there's any shred ounce of truth to the way that they depicted this, it's fucking horrendous. So the show plays on the whole narrative of folks crossing the border illegally and, children being separated from their parents and stuff like that, and stories like that. And it also speaks to, which was like a through line through the last few seasons, the private prison system and how private prisons, as you all know, have a focus on the bottom line rather than actual rehabilitation, because it's a for-profit private prison. They get paid based on the number of inmates that they have, so it's in their best interest to make sure that recidivism is high, people aren't getting rehabilitated. Lobbyists from private prison contractors, prison guard unions, make sure to lobby politicians to put their thumbs on tipping the scales towards passing stricter laws and unjust laws that happen to incarcerate folks at higher rates. A famous example of this is the coke versus crack penalty. I think it was something like 100-1. And then it was lowered under the Obama administration to 8-1, which still, makes absolutely no sense. It's literally the same drug. Coke and crack both come from cocaine. Just one is snorted up the nose, and then another one is mixed with baking soda and water and warmed up and turned into a rock and then smoked. But chemically, it's literally the same exact thing. But poorer folks, mainly people of color, black and brown folks, were more so users of crack versus wealthier folks that more prevalently use cocaine. But the sentencing would literally used to be 100-1 difference, then lowered to 8-1 difference, and I think it may have been lowered to 3-1 or ratio-wise. Anyway, the point is that these prison systems are set up to make money, to optimize the bottom line however they can. They definitely touch on that in this season, as well as season 6, season 5. But they add the element here of the immigration courts. And what this private prison did was, instead of using money to ship the inmates to court, via, bust them to court and then bust them back, and all the costs associated with that, what they did was build a courtroom within the prison. And then they would just have a judge there pretty much around the clock and do what was called, to speed up the sentencing process. The more folks they sentence, the more they save on not having to bust them around, and also the more money they make per inmate. And they just showed sad stories of a mother that was there that, did cross the border illegally. Her children were born in the US, so she was separated from them. They were staying with a foster family. She was a single mom because their father died, and she worked 2 jobs, and she came to the States because of the fact that her husband died, and the kids, they lived in a bad neighborhood that was riddled with violence, and she wanted to get her kids away from that. And I'm definitely not saying that her coming over illegally is right. Obviously it's legally wrong, but morally she was right for doing what she did. I would do it for my kid. I would take that risk to get them out of harm's way. There's a stark difference between that and gang members and drug dealers and just freeloaders that cross over illegally. You know what I mean? You have to make a distinction. Just no American person is the same. Everybody listening to this episode right now, we have similarities, but none of us are the same, right? I don't think it's fair to paint folks coming over the border, illegally or not, with the same brush. But yeah, it shows those types of stories. And the saddest part of that whole storyline was that they showed the kids that were separated from their parents, and they were just the kids. It's a full courtroom. You have children 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, And the judge is just like going through the motions and saying, do you agree that statute 1238734 was broken when you illegally crossed the border from Mexico to the US? And there's a fucking 5-year-old saying, I want my mom. You know, like, they don't know what the fuck they're saying. And then the judge is like, well, since you are unable to ask for your own counsel and didn't answer the question correctly, you are being deported. You know, it's like, holy shit. It's like, if there's any shred of truth, if anything similar to that is happening, like really happening, shame on whoever the fuck continues to allow that to happen and that put those mechanisms in place to facilitate that happening. Fuck you and the rotten twat hole that you came from. What else was dope about this season? Pusey's cameo, which was done like in it was like a flashback, obviously, because she died as a character on the show when one of the inexperienced prison guards was like holding her down and she couldn't breathe and she wound up dying. She, in this season, that happened a couple seasons ago, in this season made a cameo in flashback form when Tasty, who found out that she got pretty much fucked over with this whole riot that happened the season before, and, you know, people ratting people out and pretty much pinned it on her, even though it wasn't her that wound up killing a police officer, but a few of the inmates got together, including her friend Cindy Hayes, which is who I was speaking about before, pretty much for them to get time off and not to get additional time added. Wound up pinning everything on Tasty, wound up getting like life in jail. So she goes through this whole season slipping further and further down the drain, getting darker and darker and thinking about killing herself. And when that reaches a fever pitch, there's a scene where she's like walking down the hall to presumably do it, you know, like off herself. And she sees like a flickering light in the hallway. And then there's a flashback scene to her and Pusey talking on the phone. And during that conversation, there's like a flickering light, or Pusey says something about a flickering light. And the whole conversation that they have is like a double meaning type of conversation that applies to what they're speaking about then, and also as advice to Tasty now in the present. And it winds up deterring her from actually killing herself. The character of that plays Doggett, I forget her, what was her full name on the show? Tiffany Doggett. She winds up killing herself, or ODing. I don't think they actually get into if it was on purpose or not, but it seemed like it was. Tasty winds up finding purpose and a reason to stay alive, and keeping Pusey's name alive by starting a prison fund called the Pusey Washington Fund. And it's a way to give microloans to prisoners getting out of jail to help them get on their feet, because she realized through tutoring that she was doing in the prison for the GED exam that there was a gap financially that needed to be filled for between prisoners that got out of prison and when they would be able to obtain employment. So this fund is meant to bridge that gap and give prisoners a sense of responsibility in paying back these microloans, so on and so forth. And it's actually, if you text PW Fund, Pusey Washington Fund, just a PW Fund, to 41411, it's something that I guess the folks at Netflix actually set up. So do that for some more info. I thought that was pretty cool. A little art spilling over into reality. What else? Piper, her indecisive ass, finally made a decision and stuck to it. At the very end, her character finally got over the hump of that arc there. And I thought it was really cool at the end. All the characters kind of sort of like made a cameo appearance. And by all the characters, I mean like the characters that weren't necessarily a focal point of this season. And they were characters that in the previous season, if you remember, they were, when they closed down Litchfield Prison, they split up a lot of the inmates. And then the story obviously followed one set of inmates within the jail, which is the ones, you know, mainly that I was speaking about now. But all the other ones that were in previous seasons went presumably to other jails. So they kind of like made a cameo and went to like the jails and and places that they were at. Some people got out, and it showed like where are they now type of thing. I thought that was a pretty cool way to button up the show and wrap things up. But yeah, that was season 7, the final season of Orange is the New Black. It's a dope series, a Netflix original, and you folks should check it out if you're interested.